Hello everyone, my name is Dylan. I'm one of the co-creators of Digits, and today we're going to talk about the Gamma Spread module. So this actually replaced the Options AI module for no other reason than we'd felt for a long time there was a more efficient way to display the information, particularly on mobile. So mobile users will find it, after this tutorial, a lot easier to figure out the sort of pin down a weekly price, and not just weekly. We'll be able to do monthly, but we'll talk about why that carries some delta risk with it. I mean, if you're trading options, then you've got to worry about theta too. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hop into the analysis tab. We have Gamma, and from here, it might look similar to Options AI, and it is. We do have the date fields for the window of time you'd like to pull back contracts for. And then we have the put to call button, which we've simplified as just a switch. So if you want puts, then go ahead and switch it on, but default behavior will be that it looks for calls. Okay, so a really easy one, and one that we're actually tracking in the graph to the top right, SPY. All right, so we're gonna look at the index and see where the gamma wall is for calls today. And not just today, but right now. Okay. So I would full screen this just to make it a little bit easier, but because we want to see this graph at the same time, let's have an idea of where the prices really are. Okay, so already we can see this in what are basically 3 dimensions, right? You have gamma on the x-axis, strike on the y-axis, and for the color labels on each of the nodes, they are, well, there's a legend on the bottom. So rather than describe it as yellow or fiery orange, just take a look, hover over, and you'll get an idea of, which bullets are competing with other ones. So I use the word bullet. Let's talk a little bit about what this information actually entails, what it's supposed to persuade you to believe, right? So when it comes to risk management for large funds, and I guess you could say the volume of retail traders now too, we have our predictions and then a certain amount of risk tolerance that we have or don't have. But that spectrum of constraints, right, that are around every portfolio decide what bets people are willing to partake in. So that was sort of a vague way of explaining it. Another brief way to say it is, if you're going to cast a wide net, market makers typically decide where prices are going to go based on a number of factors that we probably would not relate to or understand. A lot of it has to do with macroeconomics, also debt and what certain people are being promised. All these things yield a certain amount of returns, and they generate or mitigate risk. Well, they do both, right? They're creating risk with the huge orders, and they're mitigating it by buying options. So this is, again, even simpler, options flow, okay? We are paying attention to specifically which prices are pinned down by a huge volume of contracts that there may be an underlying sentiment toward or against. Okay, so by that I mean, if we look at a certain pinning for SPY, well, as we know with covered calls, the goal typically is not to sell your shares. It's a win-win, I suppose, if you do just on a mathematical level, but people buy companies because they believe in the future of them. So if we take that into account, then we know that certain pins represent certain sentiment. Okay, so we're going to take another look at SPY, which is, again, all day it's been pretty much floating around 469. Let's try to find out why. So our first pin for calls is at roughly 460. Okay, so when we consider the jump in SPY, then we have to understand that a lot of people, whether that be you're casting a wide net and you say market makers or retail traders, are going to get assigned based on current conditions, right? So that's one way to look at this with just one piece of data. Another one would be at around 470, which is where we are and has the higher volume, right? So what you might consider is that these were leaps, or they were traded a long time ago, and folks are getting assigned. But what we know is basically by like 12.5% though, there is an increase right about where we are. Okay, so this is the pin that we're unlikely to see roll up into another one, just in my personal opinion. It would require the market to move all the way up. And so let's take a look at what some other strikes are. So we have about one, or 2/5 as many, roughly speaking, on about 472, it looks like. Let's go ahead and check. Yep. So, and then right above that, we have about 60% as many as the greatest number at about 473. Okay. So with that knowledge, just that frame of reference, okay, because we're going to do puts next, but just with what we know about that, I think personally that SPY is going to jump up quite a bit, maybe to this area, and fall back down to where we are today by the end of the week. I think that's the most likely situation. And then I think next week would be a lot more interesting, and maybe in this tutorial, we will take a look at what next week holds. But for now, I just want to make an example out of this one. Okay, so what we know is right where the strike is pinned at 470, that's about where we're floating, right? All day, in fact. Okay, so let's go ahead and switch to puts. So we have this the same 3D view in this case, lots of staggering on the gamma. So let's go look at this obvious one, right? Okay, now that's really cool, actually. Without a doubt. I mean, it's plain, and more so than the calls. We can go ahead and open up put call ratio and check out SPY, and we'll see that there should be for this week more puts than calls by quite a bit, right? They're all over the place, just like the calls, but about 3 times as many. So what that means pretty plainly, and I have a cat situation emerging, so I apologize if there's an interruption. What that means pretty discreetly is that people are hedging the upside. They don't. They are fairly confident that it's going to go up, and so it's much cheaper and more insurance to buy roughly 3 times as many puts. So 2.8 times. Okay, so knowing that, we can be pretty confident that SPY is going to go up. Now, with this knowledge also, it's worth considering that the gamma pins on the calls section of the graph might not matter as much as we thought, right? They could just be hedging. It could be regular volume from nothing major, no real crystal ball type predictions. And I apologize if I look at the screen instead of right at the camera. But what we know is that these calls are fluffy. They're not chunky like the puts, right? Sounds funny when you put it that way, but we're taking the puts much more seriously here. They matter a lot more. Now, people think sometimes, and I'm going to discuss a component of the contrarian investment strategy, which is more or less the cultural, it's the zeitgeist. It's the strategy a lot of people take into consideration. So when you look at a number like this, you might think intuitively or instinctively that this many puts means the market's going to go down. Oh my gosh, everyone's, long puts. They're bullish for it to go down. So that's not necessarily true. What it means, though, more objectively, is that puts are cheaper. They give a better sense of insurance if the market is going to go down, and that is because currently people believe their shares and maybe some leaps are going to benefit from the movement that we're about to see. Now, the reason one might look at it that way is because if puts are cheap, and we do have a large delta all the way down, yeah, we're looking at puts right now, we have this wall at 460, right? And we're 10 points above it. So, or roughly 9, it's going down a little bit. So with that being said, what are the chances SPY is going to drop roughly 2.5%? It could, but it's a big deal. 2 points is a really big deal. So when we consider that, the likelihood of it is statistically lower, just on an average basis. If we take a look at the history of SPY, and we just have been in the market ourselves for a good amount of time, 2.5% is obviously not a disaster, but it's a little bit of a tank. It'd be on the news, it'd be in some headlines. So can you imagine that happening over the next 2 days? No? Then you probably have nothing to worry about. So what's the deal with the calls that are also at the same spot? Why did I remark on that in the beginning? What's interesting about it is it's a delta neutral pin. It means regardless of that location, that area, they're going to make money either way. Okay, and it's unfortunate in this graph that we do not yet have a way to log this data and show you what it was just a week previous. But We're going to work on that, and it's going to be really exciting when we do. So with your guys' help, as usual, with the community, and by using this, taking advantage of it, seeing how it works for you, not just me, and not just the other people who are hedging or going long on gamma, but for people who might interpret it a little bit differently, who are day traders, who want to use it to buy leaps with a longer date range. So that being said, once we learn from everything, we'll make some big improvements, but let's go ahead and do just that. Let's look at next week. You know, I'm kind of, I'm a little cautious about this. So I'm going to, let's see, 22/11/2021, and we'll end it at 26th, right? So let's go ahead and check it out. So again, we have a call pin on 460, 470, and around the 475 area, if I'm not mistaken. The puts pretty much statically at 460. So calls first. Aha. So for those who are interested in doing this, what I'm showing you right here is how the volume is spread out tremendously. Okay, and we have one that is at about 480. And I say one, what I mean is one with dramatic volume. The rest of these are totally averaged out because they're going to be rolled into. And then they'll light up probably. But right now we just have this little guy at 480. That is pretty bullish. So let's go ahead and open PC ratio again. And we'll do, oh, we already got 22. Okay, so we'll do 26 on this one, right? 26/11/2021. And then, okay, the ratio is pretty similar. Again, meaning that if they buy only a couple calls, while they're still rather expensive, they'll make plenty of money due to delta, okay? Meaning the change in the price, just merely upward momentum, okay? And then you can buy cheap puts and many more of them to make back your money in the event that you're wrong. But I don't think they are. They being market makers, big hedge funds, folks who own 10% of the whole options chain, basically, whether they're buying or selling. So knowing this information, let's flip to puts, flip. All right, now we have some all over the place. Let's look for, okay, we got 9, 15, 9, 16. Looks like 16 is the one to beat. So take another glance. 16. Yep, and we got a 10 up there. Okay, so it looks like a battle between 10 and 10.5 average. And we have it again at 460 for next week. Well, what does that mean? That means that the pin doesn't change. If we're going to drop from this height, it's got to be something unforeseen. And the reason why I correlate that with, you know, a call pin at 480, you know, next week, and we're staying, call wall at 480 for next week, and we're switching to puts, and we're seeing it stays at 460. That means they believe they've got it figured out. That if we're going to go up, it's going to be very little more than 10 points next week. So 470 to 480. And if it goes down, it means they had no idea about it. And they'll need to react quickly, which will fire off algorithms, all that junk that we fear, but don't often think about because really it's not that common. Unforeseen, uncommon. People usually have an efficient hypothesis for how the market's going to work. Or, you know, I worded that wrong. An efficient market hypothesis. So look that up if you have time. It's an interesting idea that basically not all information is known, but what does matter is known by folks with the ability and resources to mitigate it, control it, avert risk in such a way that the market does exactly what it was planned, for lack of a better word, to do. Okay, so I hope that this explains a little bit about the Gamma options module, or at least how I use it. I'm really excited to iterate again that we are going to be making huge improvements on this module insofar as it relates to the change in these options over time. It opens up to this week. Anytime you open it up, it will default the values in the form to begin on the Monday that you are of the week that you're trading on and end that same Friday. Okay, so when it does that, you're only looking at a little bit of time. What we plan on doing very soon, it's easier than you think, is showing you how these options have changed in value over time, both their volume and basically allow us to do some machine learning on those attributes, all the Greeks, to understand better how to predict sudden trajectories upward with more of a one-click experience. This is great tech. It is basically what all retired market makers do. But better than that would be just making it easier. That's always the goal, right? Is really powerful tools as usual, but let's keep it fresh and easy so that we can focus on the actual trading and less of the analysis. That's what it can do for us. All right, so as usual, probably should have said this in the beginning. Please like and subscribe. Comment if you have any questions. I don't mind interacting over YouTube, and other people will probably hop in the discussion too. So peace, have a great rest of the week, and keep in mind what we talked about here, because next week is looking pretty bullish and you'll want to be a part of that.